Thanks, and sorry I was late. In relation to the young farmers, do you see a comprehensive package coming to try, this is probably a whole of Europe approach with the decline in young farmers? And is there, is it here or is it in Brussels? I presume it's here, where you have one definition of a young farmer is 40 years of age or under in the Department of Agriculture, and with revenue for bringing land across is 35. Can there be some tie-up done there, or some working together? In the line of, there was talk as well that, and you might be able to fill us in on this, an incentive for the older farmer to get a retirement scheme like there was out before. Is there something on the horizon there? There is a category here in Ireland called the forgotten farmer, or those were people that missed out on the payments, and they were still under 40, but they weren't in the reference years, or they had, say, low numbers in the reference years. My understanding is that was all the hurdles were cleared for that, for those to be able to be included in the cap. I think Brussels and here cleared the hurdles in that. Are they being included now? And farmers that would have started farming over the last 5 or 10 years that wouldn't have any payments, will they be included in it? Will there be, in your opinion, for the family farm, is there initiatives, or will it be up to the member state here to decide, will there be front loading to try and protect the family farm? In the line of environmental issues, will there be, are we looking at a sort of a proper environmental scheme? Are we looking at, with Mercosur, what has been announced, and as you have pointed out, that it's a bad deal for Irish farmers, beef farmers? Will there be some supports coming in for suckler cow? Is there any proposal, or is there any tie-up with the environment in Europe for farmers farming in designated areas that are not able to farm in the same way as, say, other areas that are undesignated, that have more restraints on them? Is there any separate, and I'm not saying out of cap, but is there a separate package through environment that will help those farmers? And you spoke there about the definition of a farmer. Can there be, like under the cap, or does the World Trade Agreements, whatever, decide, like, are we still going to have a situation of people that aren't really, they might be selling the grass off land and they could have a good single farm payment? Will there not be like a stocking rate or something like that that you'll have to have for the whole year, rather than this going on of having donkeys for 5 or 6 months or 7 months, that is covered in the situation? I know that's for the likes of the ANC, but my understanding at the moment, for even the cap, you don't have to have anything at all in your land, which is, in my opinion, it's an unusual situation. And I know we'll be probably told that under World Trade Agreements that you cannot promote farming, but you'd imagine we'd have some minimum type of a thing like we have for the ANC. Is there anything, and the definition of a farmer, could you explain to me, say, in a lot of the farms around the country, there has to be, a farmer has to work part-time, or has to be working and they're farming part-time. Do you see some problems coming in on that? Because if that was a proposal from Europe, that there'd be basically blowing out a lot of the family farms in the country. Those are my questions. Thank you.
On the young farmers, I mean, again, you asked about a comprehensive package given the decline and consistency in terms of definition across different agencies. Look, I think the intention is, and as you've probably seen, one of the driving factors behind the Commission's proposals has been the need to ensure generational renewal. I know it's been a feature, for instance, of the last CAP, obviously with the current reform package, I suppose, that we're in at the moment. And there is an attempt, I think, and has been an attempt under the current regime to try to, I suppose, be coherent in what we're doing again under Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. So with top-up payments, for instance, for young farmers in Pillar 1 and additional investment support ceilings provided for in Pillar 2. So I think in terms of comprehensive package, what I would say more would be the fact that everybody takes on board the need to ensure generational renewal. And again, the discussions are at an early stage at the moment, but I think certainly from our perspective, every effort will be made to try and maximise what we can do within the regulations to encourage young farmer participation. In terms of, you asked about incentives for older farmers, a retirement scheme. There is no provision for an early retirement scheme in the regulation. There is a reference to national retirement age, but there isn't a specific provision at the moment as far as an early retirement scheme is concerned in the regulation. On the forgotten farmers...
Sorry, what about the group, the forgotten farmers?
Just coming to that now, On the forgotten farmers, you mentioned about that you felt that all hurdles were cleared. I mean, it's a difficult issue, and you've seen obviously the problem that we've had here in terms of those who weren't able to qualify for these provisions or to qualify under the young farmer provisions. We've looked at this, and we've also run it by our Direct Payments Advisory Group, which was set up to look at this and other issues as far as implementation of direct payments is concerned. To be quite honest, there isn't anything in the new regulations that it allows us to do something for that cohort as it stands in the context of the regulations as they're currently set. So I think, like I say, it's a difficult issue. There isn't any provision at the moment to resolve that. In terms of all hurdles being cleared, your understanding that all hurdles being cleared, I'm not sure that there was anything in particular that we had set up, unless...
Just to clarify what I'm saying, in the programme for government there was a commitment to liaise with Europe on it. In fairness, the Minister had done that. The MEPs had a vote or put something through in Europe, I think, last Christmas, and made it very clear that all the obstacles in Europe to allow those category to be given funding in relation to payments was now accessible. And I'm surprised to hear you saying now that there's a problem with the regulation again that appears to keep them out of it, going by the information that we have both here and what was told to us from Europe and what our European said that the department and the DG in Europe would have forwarded us on information.
Okay, well, I was going to maybe to respond in a bit more detail with that. I was going to ask my colleague Fran here, who's dealing with that side in terms of direct payments, to maybe respond to that in more detail.
So I suppose the commitment under the programme for partnership government said that we would seek recognition from the Commission. So we did indeed do that. And, you know, in terms of the hurdles being cleared within the Commission, so the funding for such a group would be what's termed the funding for disadvantaged group, specific disadvantaged group. Initially, you know, under the when the CAP first came in 2015, we had confirmed in writing from the Commission that the Member States could not use the proceeds of a linear cut to fund this specific disadvantaged category. Then later on, in January 2018, there was a thing called the Omnibus regulation that came in, where there's possibility for the inclusion of specific disadvantaged categories, such as these forgotten farmers, could be funded from the National Reserve, but only if a linear cut was required to fund the priority categories, which were the young farmers and new entrance farmers. To date, we haven't needed to do a linear cut, so the possibility to pay the forgotten farmer cohort hasn't been there.
Could you repeat that, what you said there again? To date, we hadn't?
To date, we haven't had to do a linear cut to fund the reserve, so the possibility hasn't been there to date to do that.
And if there's money left over, surplus money on the young farmers, can it be put into that? My understanding was that it could from the EU now, and just...
If the funding is there and the two priority categories have been looked after, so those young farmers and new entrants. But to date, I would be honest and say that the money so far isn't there.
And under the new cap, do you envisage that that will be sorted out?
So there's still a provision in the regulations as drafted at the moment for a national reserve, but it's light on detail at the moment. So we can't say for certain. There's nothing in there at the moment that says you can fund specific disadvantaged categories.
Would it not be wise of us, if they're young farmers, and we're talking about getting in young farmers that forgot, some of these guys are still 40, 38, 39. Would it not be wise of us that unfortunately, because I heard number when they were young and they don't fit into any category, is it not wise of us, if we're trying to keep young farmers farming, that we would make sure that we would, you know, give an opening for those to be able to farm rather than them maybe packing up because at the payments they're getting?
Yeah, we can certainly look at that, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, just to come back to a couple of the other issues then that Deputy Fitzmaurice raised. You talked about the family farm and front-loading to protect the family farm. In terms of front-loading, I think front-loading, I suppose, in the context of the proposals, really arises in the context of convergence and the redistribution of payments within the CAP direct payments structure. In addition to the capping and the convergence that's proposed, there is also a proposal in relation to redistribution of payments as well. But that's still, again, under discussion among Member States and is yet to be agreed. We've asked for that provision to be voluntary. But I think probably the main mechanism, if you like, for front-loading, I think that you're talking about, would arise in the context of convergence and redistribution, I think. You asked about environment and a proper environmental scheme, I think was the way you put it, in terms of whether we'd have one. I think, again, you know, we have to look at this in the context of the overall requirement that's being imposed on us now as far as this greater climate ambition is concerned. I mentioned earlier on about the three layers that are there for us in terms of this green architecture. So there will be, in any event, greater environmental conditionality in Pillar 1. So for direct payments, people will have to do more than was the case previously. There will also be the provision then for farmers voluntarily to participate in an eco-scheme, which would provide further environmental benefit under Pillar 1. And then I suppose in terms of a proper environmental scheme in the traditional way we would look at it, I suppose under Pillar 2 we'd be looking at then a scheme that would provide even further climate results beyond that. So I suppose in the old structure, the way we've done it up until now, where we had greening, as we do at the moment under the current cap, we have greening in Pillar 1, and then we have additional measures under Pillar 2, for instance GLOS, which is available to all farmers, and we've had 50,000 or so farmers who have are participating now in that programme. Again, we have to look again at what is the best combination here. How can we achieve the maximum environmental benefit from the cap? How do we best resource it so that we can get further benefit from Pillar 1, and then look at what those further environmental benefits might be from Pillar 2. And, you know, there's a question there as to what the options might be. And again, we can return to it in the context of the public consultation that we'll engage in and our needs assessment. But of course, you know, if you have large schemes like GLOS, which is open to large numbers of farmers, it's more wide-ranging, it's more kind of broad brush strokes. Whereas it's also possible, for instance, under EIPs and other measures to have more targeted schemes, locally led schemes, if you like, which combine the various actors on the ground, as we have, for instance, with the hen harrier and freshwater.
Do you promote locally led? Because, in fairness to the department, for all the people that give out many times about, you know, the administration is fairly good in the percentage. Like when you go to locally led, you're getting consultants in, and the cost of what's involved, the farmer, in my opinion, is the loser in these locally led.
Yeah, and well, that's a key issue in the sense that, well, I think probably the experience has been, in general terms, I think, in terms of the hen harrier, I suppose, and freshwater pearl mussel in particular, early days, but certainly in the context of the Burn Life programme, again, the impact and the result of that, and the way in which the various local actors engage in the process, I think has been shown to be pretty successful, and people are happy with their contribution to that. And I think certainly the Burn has been held up as an example of the kind of scheme that we would look at replicating here. But yes, there is the issue about how do we pay for that? It is much more expensive to support those locally led schemes because of the range of actors involved and the particular circumstances on the ground in those areas. So I suppose on this question about a proper environmental scheme, it's a question of striking the balance. how do we get the maximum possible environmental benefit out of our expenditure next time around? And issues like, to what extent do we mix the different components there in terms of a broader brushstroke scheme or a more targeted scheme that will achieve particular environmental benefit in certain areas? I think that's all going to be subject to discussion over the next number of months in the context of public consultation and our needs assessment. But it's certainly a challenge for us. But I think at the very least, we will have an approach which allows us to achieve that basic environmental conditionality in Pillar 1, add a little bit in the context of eco schemes, and then add further in Pillar 2. You asked about, I think, supports for suckler cow, I think. Sorry?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I suppose in this context, we're really looking at coupling, and that's the area where it comes up in the context of the discussion generally in relation to suckler support. As you know, we can accept the Commission's report or proposals as it stands in relation to coupled supports. Commission is talking about reducing that from 13% plus 2 for specific schemes, for protein schemes, for instance, to 10 plus 2%. From our point of view, as you know, we've had a long history now of applying payments on a decoupled basis. We feel that the decoupled element, which provides the income support to allow farmers to make the choices that they need to in terms of production, combined with the kind of the targeted measures that we can put in place under Pillar 2, achieves the kind of ambitions that we want to achieve. So I think from our perspective, we wouldn't be looking at supporting or a greater level of support as far as coupled supports is concerned. So we would say that we can accept what's currently proposed by the Commission. You mentioned about farmers in designated areas, a separate package through environment that will help. Again, I'm not sure what that might involve, but I think
in the designated areas, there would be a lot of restrictions of farmers, be it some of the mountains, and even in lowland, say Callows and that, where there'd be designation done, be it so-called SAC or NHA or SPA or whatever. And I know you talked about the in-area one, and there would be a few schemes, but there are at the moment those farmers have to do about 36 different consents to do anything on their lands. They cannot farm like you can farm maybe in the field 4 miles down the road, that you can farm it more intensively than with the restrictions of the designation on it. And I am just wondering, because the other side of this is, we know on the hills and all that, that when you take sheep off a mountain, city stocking had to happen. Obviously, they'll go for the sweet area and the other area will grow more, which will mean that some guy from your department will come out and they'll go measured in the height of the scrub that's on it and they'll say this wasn't eaten. Do you know what I mean? And it gives them it's harder farming, to be bluntly about it. Yeah. And is there any, for them being not able to farm their land in the conventional way that we always were able, that they could always do it, or a farmer down the road? Because this could be here, and 5 miles down the road you could have a guy with 50 or 100 cows that can farm away, no problem. And what I'm saying is there any tie-up with the Department of Agriculture, be it in Brussels and an environment, and the same here, to make sure that those people aren't basically driven off their lands because they cannot farm?
Okay, well, if you don't mind, Chairman, I might ask my colleague Jack Nolan here, who's more technical expertise maybe in terms of some of the detail that you're talking about here.
Thank you. There is a farmers' charter meeting with NPWS. You know, the old NPWS farm plans.
There's no money in it.
Not at the moment, but there's negotiations ongoing with NPWS.
It's gone about 2 years, Jake.
They're going on a long time, all right. But that's the only money outside the cap, and that's where the money would come from.
Is there anything being looked at through Europe at helping designation?
Outside the cap, cap is the European funding. So NPWS then are dependent, or looking at national funding. You would be looking at money like A&C that goes to these areas, you know, that'll be covered. But for specific funding like that, you're looking back at national funding.
Thanks, Chairman. And maybe just on the final issue that you raised was on the definition of farmer and stocking rate for the whole year, for instance, and there was a WTO dimension to that. Yeah, I mean, on the definition of farmer, from our point of view, we do have to comply with WTO rules, which prevent reference to a production requirement. So if there's anything related to production, then it effectively contravenes WTO rules. So when we consider how we define farmers, the underlying principle, I suppose, from our point of view, is that the land has to be kept in a state suitable for farming, essentially. So that's the stricture that we have in terms of how we go about that definition. In terms of minimum requirement, again, we have to avoid the possibility that it's been linked essentially to production. And on the part-time farmers, a lot in danger, and what the response might be. I mean, I think in terms of response, are you talking in terms of a specific measure or the kinds of things that we might look at in a broader sense?
There's talk at the moment, there's a lot of talk at the moment that you know, the definition of a farmer. Is there any danger, because through no fault of their own, that the 50 or 60 or 70 acre farmer that would be going to work and coming back farming all weekend and farming every evening for 4 or 5 hours, that they would be losing out on the definition of a farm?
Well, no.
Sorry, before you move on that, on a related point, is there an issue with regard to the armchair farmer, if we could put it as such, the guy who may have rented his land for a number of years and is continuing to do so, but continue to draw his funding as well? It's probably a similar point to what you're making, Deputy Fitzmaurice. Is he now, or put it this way, should he continue to get favourable treatment, or will he be continuing to get favourable treatment under what's probably come down the road?
Can a farmer keep having entitlements and leasing them on and still getting entitlements in the new cap again if they're not farming their land? Okay.
Just getting back to the point we left off on in terms of many farmers being part-time, and is there any provision there in terms of in the definition for those part-time farmers?
No, but is there any danger on them that could be pushed out? That's what I'm saying.
Well, there shouldn't be, because the definition of active farmer, effectively a farmer, allows for pluri-active farmers as well. So it does allow for the possibility that part-time farmers will be accommodated in that context. So I think there's less of an issue there, I suppose, in terms of continuing support for part-time farmers. On the Chairman, on your question then, in terms of the armchair farmer continuing to draw funding and to get favourable treatment, or indeed whether a farmer can keep leasing entitlements if not farming. Again, that's an issue that we're looking at in terms of how we address that. It's a kind of an ongoing, I suppose, bugbear within the system in terms of how people can continue to qualify for payments. It is an issue I think that we'll have to look more seriously at as part of the evolution of the proposals over the next while, and in terms of how we respond to that. We are engaging in a process of reflection on that in terms of where we go with that process over the next while. And we'll see how that can fit in then in terms of how the proposals progress. But look, I mean, we are aware of the issue. Obviously, there are challenges there in terms of trying to make sure that payments are going to active farmers. And I think certainly as far as the experience of the current cap process and the current cap period is concerned, we've been trying to, and as part of the negotiation of the proposals last time around, we tried to bring about a situation where payments were going to active farmers. And I think certainly the pressure and the preference from Member States' point of view would be that that should continue. So from our perspective, I think, yes, that will inform the approach to the process as we go on.
And does there anything be looked at in the line of, say, somebody on $250,000 a year still getting single farm payments? Is that going to continue? Enough?
Well, there is provision.
An off-farm income.
Sorry, that if somebody who's getting...
Somebody in off-farm income, if they're getting, say, $250,000 a year, or maybe $500,000 a year, that they're able to still draw single farm payments, where someone might be struggling on 20 grand a year of an off-farm or 30 grand and would have maybe only a few thousand of a single farm payment. Is there anything being looked at in that in the overall context?
Not explicitly, I think, in terms of what you'd be saying there would be a differentiation between almost the level of income that somebody might be making off farm, which would then have some
That'd be mean testing it basically, wouldn't you? Is that what you're-
That's the kind of thing, that's the kind of situation I think that you'd be moving to.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think you'd be moving to something that's well beyond the scope of what we're talking about here in terms of the structure of the payment system.
We're going away from the simplification of the cap then anyway, I would suggest.
Certainly would be, yeah.
On capping, where are we at that at the moment now? You know, there's been a proposal to introduce capping, but there was a lot of criteria involved in that, or potential criteria.
Yeah, I mean, we have said that we do accept the principle of capping. I mean, as you know, there is a proposal there, and there is an effective cap at the moment under the current regime, and there are proposals there to reduce that further under the new regime. We do accept the principle that we can limit the overall payments per farmer, and we've said that we accept the proposal that's in the Commission's proposal to have mandatory capping in the next round of the cap. Now that'll be finalised partly, I suppose, in the context of the MFF discussions. But there is a proposal there to have degressivity, effectively, or a reduction in payments of various orders beyond €60,000, for instance. So I think if you're between 60 and 70,000, you drop by 25%, 70 to 85, it's a further percentage, and then you can apply a cap then at 100. So
Can you come lower?
say again?
Can you come to 50,000 or to 60,000, what you're looking at?
Well, the proposal is for degressivity to take effect from 60,000 upwards. I mean, I think as far as that goes, you know, like I say, we are in, and we have, I think, applied pretty fairly and rigorously over the last while the convergence requirements that have been there previously and the degressivity requirements that have been there. We've effectively implemented a de facto cap of 150,000 up until now. We don't see any difficulty with that being dropped. 60,000 is the point at which degressivity starts under the regulations. The European Parliament has said that cap should be, I think, at 100,000 as well. So I think the bottom line would be that the principle is well established. We don't have an issue with it. As part of our analysis and our discussion of this over the next number of months, we'll be looking at what the impact of the various levels of that degressivity and the layering of that degressivity might have in the context of the Irish approach. As you know, the discussions are still ongoing. Capping is still one of those issues that are kind of outstanding. And when we come to look at the modelling of the future cap and what it might look like after 2021, once the proposals have become a little bit more mature and there's a little bit more certainty maybe about where we're going in that, then we can start to model in more detail what precisely the impacts of that would be. But certainly,
I understood, am I right in saying that the proposal at the moment is like that it'd be 2027 before you'd start it and you'd take a bit off each year, and that'd be 2027 before you'd have them actually back to the 60,000. Would that be fair to say?
well, the degressivity happens over the period of the framework. The idea would be, under the current programme, all farmers have to get at least 60% of the national average. So there's convergence there as well, and everybody gets 60%. And the proposal is to move to 75% of the national average by 2027 under the new proposals.